Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host for the show. And of course, welcome. I'm really happy to have you here. And if you are new, especially welcome to you. And there's a lot to catch up on, in terms of episodes. But the best way to stay up to date with all of it is to subscribe to the show. You can do that on YouTube or on Overcast or Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps you stay up to date, but it also helps the show because the more that people subscribe, the more people can find the show. And you know that Keys to the Shop is not just a podcast. We also do a lot of coaching and consulting for coffee shops, whether that's new coffee shops or existing brands and companies who want to take their business to the next level, their training, their hospitality and operations. We work with lots of different people. We've worked with over 85 different companies over the last 7 years. And this could be a good fit for you. If you want to reach out about Keys to the Shop consulting, just email chris@keystotheshop.com. But if you're looking for also community, a supportive community of like-minded business owners, coffee shop business owners that are there to support each other over the course of a given period of time, a cohort of peers in coffee, then that's what I had created key holder coaching groups to do. We have run 3 separate seasons, and the 4th season is right now open for applications. We're going to be starting that around the beginning of April, and I'm doing interviews right now with people who have submitted their applications. And while we still have the applications open, I have created a link in the show notes. You could also just reach out to me, chris@keystotheshop.com, to set up a conversation. I'll send you an application. These support groups, the key holder coaching groups, are transformational. They're encouraging accountability groups that coffee shop owners have universally said that have participated in this. That's one of the best investments that they've made. And it's also just a encouragement for them to keep going because it's an isolated position you have as an owner, and having outside perspectives, shared stories, being able to exchange insights and help move each other along down the path of this coffee journey is what it's all about. So if you're interested to learn more and to apply for this next season, go ahead and email chris@keystotheshop.com or just go right to the application in the show notes. You'll find that application for key holder coaching groups. So today's episode is brought to you by the wonderful folks at Arto Brick. Arto.com is their website, at Arto Brick on Instagram, hard surfaces, tile and stonework, beautiful stuff, as well as the Pacific Barista Series, the cornerstone, the foundational plant-based beverage in specialty coffee. Wonderful folks there at pacificfoodservice.com. But we're going to talk more about that later. Right now, I want to get right into our episode, our Founder Friday for the month. And I am excited because this is a company that I've heard so much about. They're doing wonderful work. They've been in this game now for 7 years. It is an ownership group of 4 people. I think this is the most people we've ever had on the show at one time. It's 2 couples that are friends that have started this 7 years ago. And this place is called Fount Coffee and Kitchen. It is owned by 2 husband and wife teams in Morrisville, North Carolina. Their names are Shawn and Kristen Preissner and George and Katie Kilgore. They are 2 local families that came together with a shared vision and a passion for great coffee, food, and hospitality. And initially, they met in 2015, became friends, put together a business plan, then opened the doors of Fount in December of 2018. They recognized the need for something to exist in the Morrisville Research Triangle Park community for both specialty coffee and a community gathering space. So they sought to meet this need with premium menu offerings, elevated guest experience, intentional workplace culture. It's all in the forefront of their mission, which I love. And you'll get a lot of this message in today's episode from the founders. All 4 of them sat down together to interview, and I thought it was a really insightful time, especially if you're somebody who wants to create an others-focused, sustainable, and caring, joy-filled culture of excellence. This is what they have done on purpose since day one, And I'm just in awe of the intentionality and how inspirational their example is. And it isn't just this aspirational cultural pursuit that they have at the expense of the business. Their business is flourishing as well. And I would say it's as a result of the kind of delivery of value throughout the quality of the product, the quality of the hospitality, and the satisfaction and joy that the people who work there feel as well. It all comes together. And if you know anything about Keys to the Shop, this is like a prime example of the kind of holistic, virtuous cycle that we're talking about in a coffee shop that we need more of. And that's why I'm really excited to present this to you today, especially around the conversation that we're talking about recently on these episodes and across the industry, where the price crisis is happening with retail and the costs of goods and things. We have to double down on relationships and investing in delivering value. This example that Fount Coffee and Kitchen has expounded upon in this conversation is a prime example, and I think it should inspire you, and I think it will. So let's get right to it. Here now is my conversation with the 4 founders of Fount Coffee and Kitchen. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Keys to the Shop. I say everybody, this is the largest group of people I've had on the show so far, but Fount Coffee, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And I'm just kind of hearing, and I've heard a lot of great things about Fount. And you're in an area where, what do you call it? In Durham, right? Where we call the Research Triangle, I think is what I remember. Like the whole Raleigh, Durham, etc. There's a lot of great coffee around your area. And you're making a real name for yourself. We've made a name for yourself. I see you all over Instagram and being praised by folks like Lem Butler of Black and White Coffee. And you got something special going on there. And so that's not easy to do. And I'm excited to explore this, the evolution or the founding and evolution of your coffee brand. So I think one of the things I'd like to do just to start out here, because we've got this super group of owners. It's I feel like I'm interviewing the Beatles or something. We have from your right to your left. Let's just kind of say who we are and what your role in the business is, and let's jump into some details about your business.
Yeah, so I'm George, married to Katie, and my focus is front of house, the coffee program, hospitality, training the team, front of house, anything beverage related and guest related. And then I also tag team with Katie on the marketing side.
I'm Katie. I manage what I like to call internal relations, so HR, and external relations, so PR, branding, things like that. And then also do the administrative side, so email, things like that. And then some of our event rentals, catering, things like that.
I'm Kristen, married to Shawn, and I am over the back of the house of Fount, so anything kitchen related, menu, process, things like that. I also manage our bookkeeping, accounting, and then do the schedule for Fount as well.
And I'm Shawn, over operations and different vendor relationship management items, as well as some of the non-glamorous maintenance work after hours.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the least most qualified of that.
That's right.
That's nice. It takes everything, right? I mean, you all spread yourselves out across all the things that the business needs to run, and probably a lot of, things that you didn't plan on doing, but need to throw in to do. How many years has it been now since you've been operating Fount?
We opened in December of 2018, so we are coming up on 7 years this year. I guess 6 years.
So that's a lot of history to cover here. 7 years. And it's a particularly interesting 7 years with COVID and just kind of, I wouldn't even call it third wave. It's almost like post third wave coffee, if we want to use that word. We're all kind of wondering what the next wave is. So that purgatorial place of, is it progressive coffee? But you've got a lot of history of coffee to draw from to inspire you to start this. And that's my first question, I suppose, is how did you conceive of starting a coffee shop and then decide on this is the kind of coffee shop, given all of the options that we have available to us. What was that first kind of spark? And then what direction did you head down and why?
Yeah, so we all kind of fell in love with coffee at home individually. I was in college at the time. Katie was as well. We were just dating. And I played golf in college, but during the winters when it was super cold, I wasn't playing much golf. So I would go visit some cafes and started drinking just your classic mochas. Kind of fell in love with that. A few local spots downtown Raleigh. And then, like a lot of coffee folks, had a natural Ethiopian coffee. Tasted like blueberries. You've heard it many times, but was very excited about that and started going down a home brewing rabbit hole kind of through college. And one winter for my birthday, Katie surprised me that I would go to a local coffee roaster and kind of shadow him just for the day, help him out and just like learn a little bit more about coffee. And I think the week before, Kristen and Shawn had also done that. And Billy was his name. And Billy said, you guys need to meet. So he introduced us. And that's kind of where our friendship started, which is super fun. And they shared that they had like a 10-year plan to hopefully open a cafe. And that's what I wanted as well. So kind of fast forward, Katie and I got married right after college. And our friendship had progressed quite a bit. So we said, all right, it's time to start a business plan. So we spent a few years writing our business plan, kind of strengthening our relationship. And yeah, we try to take a lot of our corporate world background and apply it to small business. We also didn't have I worked in a cafe for just a little bit. Kristen was a server. So not a ton of like coffee specific experience, which people did not recommend us doing that. I wouldn't necessarily recommend us doing that. But really we try to take a customer or consumer mindset and then apply it to our processes and kind of how we're going to lay out our shop, which I think was an advantage. Obviously we didn't know what we didn't know. We still, there's so many things that we still don't know and we're evolving. But again, kind of a guest focus, customer focus. When a guest is walking in, what do they see? What do they feel? That was kind of like our goal in starting a cafe. You mentioned it earlier, but RTP, Research Triangle Park, is in Morrisville. So it's this kind of weird area in between Durham and Raleigh and Chapel Hill, right near the airport, but tons of business folks out there. Shawn worked in RTP, and Kristen and Shawn live right on the edge of RTP, and there's no cafes out there. And so we wanted to create we call it a community gathering place, a place for folks that lived in RTP, business folks, just to come gather and enjoy good food and coffee. Really the idea of coffee and food are this like universal language that bring us together. So creating a gathering space around that was kind of the goal.
So let me ask for me, it's the next logical question, which is, there's two things that I heard. One is you wanted to bring some of your corporate background and apply it to small business. And then two, you're talking about the hospitality gathering place, customer experience. And in my mind, this is just my upbringing, those two are just kind of at odds in some ways. And it doesn't have, I know that technically it doesn't have to be. And obviously you've proven that there are things that you can take from that and apply. So your corporate background, what for the group here, what is it that you have seen has applied to small business that's actually worth drawing from that would allay people's fears of, oh, what do you mean by corporate? What are the redemptive qualities of your past experience that you've seen work well in the cafe?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think definitely, like George hinted at, that guest experience, and then also the workplace culture. So external culture with guests, and then that internal culture with our team. That internal culture is definitely the bulk of the area where we pulled from that corporate background. And so things like PDIs, which is a professional development interview, that was something we pulled straight from corporate experience. And what that looks like and what it is at Fount, at least, is a member of the management team, which is our 4 owners, and then one of our managers, sits down with a member of the Fount team regularly. It used to be every month. Now it's every other month, and asks the same questions. So it's a check-in where we're saying, how can we better serve you? How can we better come alongside you? How happy are you with your current position? Do you have any ideas on how Fount could be better? What challenges have you faced? How are you contributing to the mission? Those types of check-ins with team members. So the extent to which we are involved with our team members and the way that we are building culture, also the professional development side of our team, we do have, while we plug into positions and we work alongside our team in positions on the floor, there is an implicit hierarchy. So we have managers like we talked about, but also shift leads. These are front of house or back of house specific leaders that we raise up. We don't just like hire a shift lead or hire a manager. These are folks that have, started with us and that we inevitably raise up to build our leadership bench. And we have regular meetings where, we're looking at sort of those key skills that are needed to be a strong leader at Fount and beyond. So from the corporate side, a lot of internal ways we manage our team internally.
We've also learned how to run meetings to be really effective. So the 4 of us meet weekly, and we do a level 10 structure, which if you Google, there's like a template out there. But essentially, we start with like 90-day priorities, and then we do team member or guest headlines. So just highlights things that we want to shout out. And then we have a section called an issues discussion, where we talk about anything that we need to work through as a team. And at the end of the meeting, we review our action items for the following week. And I guess actually we review those before we do issues discussion on if they're complete or not. And then at the end of the meeting, we have a comprehensive list of things that need to get done the next week. And then at the end of the meeting, you rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, how effective the meeting was. And if it's an 8 or below, then you have to give a suggestion on how it could be better. So we do that as owners. And then we also meet with our managers monthly and use that same kind of structure. And then one other corporate element that we've imputed into the Fount culture is we do a quarterly all hands meeting. So we get our team together, we provide a meal, and then we kind of sync up on different processes that maybe are inconsistent, or we break up front of house, back of house. So we do demos and things like that. And that's just a way for the team to all stack hands again on what our mission is at Fount and any like clarity we need to clear up on things that are inconsistent and how we can better serve our guests.
Yeah, since there's no other time where there's an opportunity to get all 33 plus people under one roof. And so it's fun all around because you're typically only working with a handful of those folks, and then that rotates. But to have everyone together collectively is great.
So this is a business. This is a real, it's in coffee shops. Sometimes there's this a very organic, very vibey way of approaching problems. And if you're all the right fit and we're all the right fit and we love coffee enough, it's all going to come together. And the regularity of your meetings, the different kinds of, heuristics you use to determine whether you're not going to have a meeting the same way again, right? These are all very super examples of something that is a discipline that I'm sure at certain times are more difficult to do than other times, because you just maybe think I have so much to do. Are we really going to have this PDI? Are we really going to have this quarterly? It's expensive to have this quarterly meeting. So how do you overcome the inertia of the discipline in order to reap the benefits of its consistency?
Yeah, I quickly think back to, as that's so true, we used to not schedule these PDIs. Like we use 7 shifts to schedule shifts for the team. And they used to be organic, where while we're working alongside, if there's a lull in the shop, then we can grab someone and go sit down. But they always range. Yes, we have they intend to be 15 minutes long, but some of them require extra time, and that's worth it. But then your team is left hanging. So we've learned over time, again, that setting aside that time is important and worth it. Now, it's obviously an extra expense to block out that in their scheduling. So they'll usually do that now before or after their shift. So that it just rolls right in. And so, yeah, there's an expense there, but we found it to be so worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we talk about it a lot, but this idea, and there's a lot of things that come from those meetings, but communicating the standard, certainly we have standard operating procedures and different things, but we try not to be like overly rule focused. Rather, we try to be standard focused. So this idea that, every 30 days we're recasting the mission and the vision, and that's kind of recasting the standard. And so it's a great opportunity for us to say, hey, you're meeting the standard, you're not meeting the standard. Here's some feedback for you, or maybe we're not hitting the standard that we've set for Fount, and they can give feedback to us as well. So super important time, even though, to your point, it can be costly.
Yeah. And to Shawn's point, the value of these can't be overstated, because I would say one of the most powerful takeaways from these meetings, whether it's a PDI or a sync or whatnot, is that question of how can Fount improve? How the exact question is,
do you have any ideas to improve product or service?
Yeah, at Fount. And so the way that Fount has evolved to better serve our team and to better serve our guests cannot be divorced from the information we gather from, yes, that question, but then of course also from that question, you build this relationship with your team and your guests where they know you really do want their feedback and you really are going to weigh it and likely implement it.
You really do want it. That is really interesting, because sometimes it's tempting to not want it. If you're rolling down the road, and people, if you're not apprenticing yourself to becoming the kind of person who can with integrity say that you do, it doesn't seem like you could fake it very well.
Yeah, it's definitely a muscle you have to build, the ability to receive and implement feedback as well as give feedback directly. Of course, we mean that always in a professional and non-personal way, but even to the point when we do interviewing, that is one of the questions we ask, is we say, how do you do with feedback? Do you feel like you can give it well? Do you feel like you can receive it well, implement it well? Because that posture of humility is so important in this business.
And I would say one of the benefits of having a 4-owner team is that we can remind each other of that. And when one of us is feeling unmotivated to have the meeting or like schedule it, somebody else is making sure that it's happening. So, I mean, we ebb and flow for sure, like any human with disciplines, but having 4 people hold each other accountable is really awesome. And I would say even for a sole proprietor, like building a leadership team where you can have some other people to hold you accountable is really helpful and important. Even our managers bring things to our attention that we need to hear.
Yeah.
Holding you accountable, in the implication there is unto what? And if you haven't established that what, or like the goal, then having a 4-person owner team seems like a nightmare. Some people are thinking, how do you do it? And I'd like you to answer that question, because there are a lot of people who have partners. They have partners and spouses or significant others. It's very tricky. And what you're rendering here with your business, I just want to make a mention here that our mutual friend Lem Butler of Black and White Coffee has twice now called you out on his Instagram as being a place to definitely go when you're in town for Coffee Champs, which is I guess this weekend. Asterisk next to your name in his list said, "Trust me, you'll want to make time for this one," and that's not any small thing, because what you've rendered is something that baristas try to do with coffee. They try to learn about the bean, the circumstances as being ground and tamped and all this stuff, the factors that end up in the cup, and the taste is this. It seems like that's what you're doing for culture in the way that you're approaching the feedback and staying tuned in and everything else. But again, it's all unto what? Like the mission, vision, values. So how do you come to this consensus where you actually can effectively hold one another accountable without there being significant friction, let's say?
Well, I mean, we entered into the partnership just like we would a marriage, with the long-term goal in mind. You have to, like Katie said, you have to be willing to receive feedback. You have to have that posture of humility. We are not perfect at that by any means, but you have to enter into it knowing that, like, we have not arrived individually and Fount has not arrived. And then also from the get-go, we had to clearly define lanes and ownership. So George is head of the front of house. I'm head of back of house. Katie is, what we said at the beginning. We all have our roles. And while we come to our owners' meetings asking for help or feedback in those areas, having those clearly defined lanes makes it easy to defer if there is, to defer to the area owner if there is a disagreement of any sort. So not that happens a ton, but we do have 4 opinions on things. So it's helpful to have clearly defined lanes. And then, like I said, that posture of humility that we're going to sacrifice some things here. We're going to compromise here. And it's all for the goal of accomplishing the mission and vision of Fount. So having a clearly defined mission and vision too is very important, because that is where we keep our eyes.
What was that vision and mission? Is it what you said earlier, a place for community?
Yeah, so the mission statement of Fount is to always serve in a way that is intentional, excellent, and joyful, knowing that our efforts bear a lasting impact. So intentionality, excellence, and joy are really the 3 pillars by which we make processes, we filter things through. The vision statement is just sort of similar to that. The vision is like, okay, if we're walking in our mission day in and day out, what is that vision that we're sort of looking to do? So the vision statement, this is a good test for myself as head of HR, is to disrupt the fast casual and serve specialty coffee industries by providing a new elevated standard for guest experience, workplace culture, and menu offerings. So just that idea of a lot of intentionality with our menu, with our products, and with our people. Because ultimately what we believe about hospitality is this, that what you put in front of someone, whether it's coffee or food or something else across a different industry, is a reflection of the value you place on that person. So if you're putting slop in front of someone, or it's good quality, but you're just sort of slapping it in front of them, you're not esteeming that person. You're not reflecting that person's value back to them. And so all of these things really do work together. And it's one of the reasons why we, kind of going back to one of your questions earlier, why you can't divorce that internal culture from external culture, hospitality.
I would say if you walk into Fount and you ask our team what our mission statement is, that is one of our questions in our professional development interviews, because it's so important to our culture. That everyone is contributing to that mission. Fount would not be what it is without the team. So we reiterate that every other month at PBIs, and then also at all hands, that we are serving excellently, intentionally, and joyfully at Fount.
Yeah. And we have a lot of folks with different personalities, different walks of life, of course, different skill sets, different backgrounds, but we all stack hands and unify around the mission.
I love that. It's such a great answer. And it gave me shivers, like the excellence and joy, just joy being in there. There is a past episode, I think we talked about metrics that aren't usually tracked that well, in that there's I use the word vibe, or the feel, and the culture is a thing to be attuned to. But I guess the PDIs are part of how you know you're doing that work well, by your mission is actually being accomplished. How else do you track that? Is it just something you walk in and you see and you feel like everybody here is having a good time? Or is there more to it than just kind of, arms open, like, let me test the temperature of the room?
Yeah. I mean, explicitly conceptually what we want to know is this team member's position, is it currently enjoyable, sustainable, and fulfilling? aka does it align with their goals? Are they genuinely enjoying the job? And then, of course, a big one in our industry, is it sustainable? Are they close to burnout? Are there things going outside of work or inside of work that's contributing to them not feeling like they can stay at Fount? And so whether or not we are explicitly asking questions of that nature, there are times where we do ask just that, or just in more subtle ways where when we're informally kind of dialoguing with them or getting a pulse from managers or other people on the floor on, hey, this person has some indicators of, feeling a little burned out. That's a big flag to us to have a conversation.
Yeah, just more and more communication channels we've added over the years as we've learned how important these things are, such as so we use GroupMe for most of our text communications, and we have different threads for back of house leads, front of house, whole team, kitchen, and then we have one for managers, shift leads, and so there's just constantly that pulse being shared. But additionally, we recently added an end of day mod pad. Our manager on duty, they'll fill out, and there's 4 questions on there, but one of them are getting at kind of, was there any issues that arose, and with these people, have they resolved, or is anything lingering? And then we can, from all that, determine or continue to monitor if it's a one-off or if it's more of a pattern thing. We need to check in more intentionally with X person, because they might be going home, something going on, or something that they're bringing along to work.
There's the specific question is how is team culture and morale today? So then the manager can kind of reflect on how is everybody doing? Because our goal for the management position is team care and culture, and then guest care. That is what we have laid out for them as their main primary job responsibilities. I mean, they're plugging into the schedule and they're on the floor, but focusing on team care and then focusing on guest care, where we want their eyes. So asking that question at the end of the day helps them to think about the team and how they're doing. And we've additionally given them a budget to be able to care for the team. So if somebody, had a death in the family, for example, then they have the freedom to be able to bring flowers to that person or have a card signed by the whole team. Things like that to continue to make the workplace enjoyable and sustainable and fulfilling, people really matter.
So this all sounds very wonderful. And yet sometimes you have to have the courage of your convictions when, even if you do these things that you believe in, and that over time, the gains that you get, right? The aggregation of marginal gains, you get this result. But in the midst of it, when you don't receive the kind of positive feedback that you would hope a team member gives by having this consistent feedback, or maybe a team member is kind of annoyed that they have to have another PDI or go to a meeting when they could be at home watching Netflix or something, right? In those moments, I think ownership can bend and say, you know what, we're just going to skip it this time, or we're not going to make people do these things. But then it seems like the momentum would get disturbed. So you have to really believe in the power of these elements to actually be real parts of what your business needs, not just extras to make it a fractional amount better. Is something that's at times, especially maybe early on when you were just testing the waters to try to apply these frameworks to your business, was it tempting to just not do it? And when you get to that point, how do you convince yourself to keep going in that, even in the face of what seems to be no return on what you believe is a good thing?
Yeah, I think at the core of our business, we see, we're not just a coffee shop or a cafe. We are in the business of people. And ultimately, these measures that we take are in the lens and for the purpose of caring for and investing in people. In this particular conversation, internally, meaning our team, but of course we take similar measures externally for our guests. And I think knowing that people matter and that our mission, again, is tied to that we want to truly impact people, and that coffee and great food and hospitality are just sort of the vehicle or the means to do that. really give us the kick in the pants to be like, no, this really does matter.
And there are, I mean, we used to do PDIs every month, and we've made some adjustments because of feedback. Like, okay, this feels too frequent. This is like too often that I'm receiving feedback and not given enough time to implement it. So we moved to a bi-monthly schedule with the PDIs. But I think that, like, I hear what you're saying. There's some people that probably dread the meetings, but we really try to balance like affirmation and encouragement, and we see you and we care about you in the way that we interact on a day-to-day basis, where those bi-monthly meetings, when we're actually giving the feedback, hopefully can be received as professional in nature and not personal, because we've invested in that person the rest of the time, you know, between those meetings.
And I would say in the same vein, these meetings, I'm thinking specifically about our all hands meetings. So those are every quarter we come together, share a meal, recast the vision. We make them really fun, not in a cheesy way, but we want to model hospitality to our team. How you do one thing is how you do everything. And so we try and candidly, it can be hard to find really good catering or takeout for a group of 30 plus, but we aim to do that. We usually have like a DIY cocktail bar featuring a team member's like favorite cocktail, for example, where it's like, oh, make a margarita tonight in honor of so-and-so, or bring in a dessert that is someone else's favorite. We try and, you know, celebrate anniversaries. We actually, for the all hands meeting, go through a similar level 10 meeting structure where we do headlines. We have team members shout out one another where they've been seeing other people carry out the mission. So we do. And then in addition to sort of those all hands, we do have on a very informal, not required level, just team hangouts, which we sort of throw together every month, but not when we have all hands meetings. But it might be something like, okay, let's go to like the minor league baseball team together, or we're going to go to this brewery together, or we've done really crazy things like aerial yoga, or, you know,
brought a magician in,
indoor rock climbing, you know. And so again, it's not just, if in the end, we want to make it clear to people, we're not just about what you can do for us. We're about you. We care for you. And so I think if those meetings were it, and we were just trying to pull from people rather than care for people and be a good steward of them, then I think that would be different.
Well, hey, everybody, it's Chris, and we'll be right back to our conversation with the founders of Fount Coffee and Kitchen. But right now I want to talk a little bit about foundations. I want to talk about the material and the feeling of your cafe, the vibe, the culture that is taken in by the eyes and by the senses of feel. This is something that the materials in your cafe communicate to your customers. Everything communicates to your customers. And when you're wanting to make a unique and beautiful space, you want something that communicates intentionality, a sense of grounding. Tile work, stone work, hard surfaces. These are things that you don't want to overlook. Our friends at Arto Brick, arto.com, and on Instagram especially, follow them there at Arto Brick. They do this for lots of different venues, especially in restaurants, in coffee shops that want to create something beautiful that is unique. And if you are in a process of trying to decide what kind of tile work and stone work and other things do we want to have done in our second cafe or in our first cafe, reach out to them. Armin Alagian is one of the sons of the founder, Arto. He and his brother Vod run this, and it's based in LA. Everything is made in LA, and you can check them out, follow them there, and reach out to Armin and say you heard about this on Keys to the Shop. You want to explore working with them for your next project at Arto Brick on Instagram. Now, today's episode is also brought to you by the plant-based beverage Originals, and still the preferred method, the preferred product for baristas worldwide. That is the Pacific Barista Series, made for baristas, tested by baristas, stands up to the heat from steaming, produces awesome texture in the final product, and the final product also is focused on the coffee. So it's not overwhelming almond, overwhelming oat. It's a nice balance. That's what makes it perfect for your cafe. Go to pacificfoodservice.com, Check them out, get samples, and try it for yourself. If you're looking for amazing plant-based beverages for your customers, I think the Barista series from Pacific is the one to get. So back to our conversation with the founders of Fount Coffee and Kitchen. One of the things that I feel is maybe on the mind of a listener right now is that none of this would be possible if it weren't for the fact that you have a sustainable business. Mm-hmm. So you can't have sustainable roles and barista roles and et cetera. The business has to work. How soon into starting Fount did you start to see the momentum build in these areas and others where you started, to become profitable, second, where you had enough of a margin that you can start really investing into these areas with, not, I wouldn't say abandon, but with at least enough security to know that you can, it's not going to break the bank to have these types of investments into your staff, where right now a lot of people are cutting back. Let's see where we can slash and all this other stuff. We've been advocating that you lean into relationships and try to figure out ways to innovate that direction. That seems to be the mode of operation for you. But practically speaking, how do the financials play into the success of the business, into your ability to care for the staff the way you've described?
So we're an S Corp, and so revenues offset by expenses, and ideally you want to kind of break even or get in the middle so that you're not just paying Uncle Sam everything. So that has also lent itself to some of these expenses or team investments. We have budget for that. We want to, more than just the fact that we want to be able to do that. It's like making a budget. You have that framework where, okay, we want to get to these sort of expense figures, right? And we monitor. We're very thankful and grateful that from the day we opened, people have been coming through the doors. We were there all day, every day until I developed plantar fasciitis, which was probably 6 or 9 months. And we were open 7 to 7, 7 to 9 on the weekends. And then you got closing and opening. We didn't have a dishwasher to start. So even after close, we were all there just cranking dishes. We scaled very slowly and we were much younger and very naive, but we just hustled. When it's your back's up against the wall, you just do it, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like a blur. So, so we don't know how we did it, but you just push through and then things get better and better. And then we kind of just added these, again, we pulled from our corporate experiences over time where we're like, all right, this would benefit the small team that we have right now, where we need to add these roles. And then you just kind of scale it slowly but surely. And in our weekly syncs, we do go over our scorecard, we call it, where we have different key performance indicators across the functions of the business. So things like, we look at, weekly net sales. We look at average ticket, dollar amount. We look at average number of sales per day. But we also look at the average tip, because we pool tips across the team. So they get the average of that. And we look at that because that, that lends itself to, when we keep our staff efficient, the schedule efficient, they get more tips, which they obviously care significantly about. So we look at those different indicators because we know that will also impact how they're viewing the business and how Fount's going. But also another very real world example that we just wrestled through this past month when we were doing our 2025 planning was back to your last question, kind of, what do they really view as valuable? Not only the PDIs, but these monthly team hangs, right? So last year we did, some more extravagant ones, and then, big holiday party, etc. And we've received some feedback that, ultimately some people would rather just have more money in their pocket, right? And so we listened to that. And even though it hurts when you're like, we spent all this money on this holiday party and you weren't thankful or whatever, we are looking at scaling back our monthly team. We already booked them all out, and they're more modest so that we can add to their PTO bank or whatever we ultimately are going to do at the end of the year instead, because that ultimately moves the needle more for them. And that's what we've heard. So So we're constantly like listening to that, even though that feedback hurts sometimes in the moment, it's making the whole team more satisfied.
Yeah. There's ways to get creative for sure in caring for people with a very small budget. And that's when I don't know if we've brought up yet that we do an offsite at the beginning of each year. So before we had kids, we would go to somewhere fun. We still try to go to fun places, but between the four of us, we have 4 kids, including very little ones. But we try and go to a fun food and drink destination and just sort of meet around the clock and go through some planning for the year. And with that, laid out our team hangouts for the year. And we're able to come up with some really fun ones that will rally people, but that won't break the bank.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, in the beginning, our all hands meetings were at our house and we were making a big pot of chili.
Yes.
Like it was not a big catering spread, but we were modeling hospitality in a different way. So I think you can, even with very little margin, still invest in a team. And when Shawn mentioned like the profit and loss statement and looking at our expenses, like the best expense that we can do is back into the team. So whether that be team meetings or their pay, because Fount would not be Fount without our team. So
yeah, I really appreciate that. The humble offsite or the meeting, I've got lots of memories of the owner's house or having a bring your own dish before an SOP meeting and that kind of thing, where it really felt like fun and like we're human beings together doing it's a job, but this brought us together. You can almost be thankful for your job instead of having a little disdain for it when you start to realize the things that it's afforded you, the relationships it's afforded you, even the development of your person and your skills that your staff are going to be able to bring with them past working at Fount Coffee. Those things are attributable to their time there. So you mentioned earlier the efficiency of your scheduling, and that's another one of those, like it's kind of like a pink flag, like, oh, efficient scheduling. Do you mean that there's just like one person during a rush because that is low labor? Because a lot of people will be like, yeah, we'll just like, we can't afford to have 2 or 3 people on shift. How do you actually just break down the structure of a given day at Fount in terms of staffing and how you go about creating sustainable jobs for people where they're not burned out, but they're still efficiently scheduled and equipped to succeed in that shift?
Yeah, so from a front of house perspective, I'll touch on that and maybe let Kristen touch on back of house. But obviously it's a balance. Shawn mentioned it, but out of the get-go, when we first started Fount, it felt very busy. Maybe for like a new cafe. Looking back at the numbers, it was definitely not as busy as it felt. Just getting your feet wet, kind of learning, right? You don't know what you don't know. And so not many people on the floor at that point, and it felt very busy, but definitely not as busy as we thought. But fast forward today, obviously 7 years in, or almost 7, the schedule is so much different than the beginning. But like this morning, for example, Friday morning, you're going to have a lot of folks on the floor front of house. You'll have a position that we call concierge, which is just the POS. Mm-hmm. Call it concierge because it's this idea that's like a white glove service, right? You're communicating to the guest and you're there to serve the guest, not just take their order. You're facilitating their hospitality experience. Mm-hmm. You might have someone bring a latte to the table and have that interaction, but the main interaction, hypothetically, potentially, is just that concierge interaction. And so for a few years, we would work the register all the time and then kind of develop the team into that standard. So you have concierge, you have B1, which is basically running the espresso machine. They're that point person. Not always, but mostly a shift lead. But they have the ability to multitask and to delegate at a very high level. So obviously you want to be pulling espresso in a rush very well, which is very hard. Mm-hmm. But there's a million other things going on that are also very, very important. I say it a lot. We could have a very expensive coffee on but if it takes 15 minutes to get to the table, that coffee's not going to taste very good to the guests. So you're balancing that, right? You've got B1, and then you also have B2. B2 is kind of brew bar, batch brew, teas, pour overs, and you have a bar back, which that person is bar backing the espresso machine, steaming milk, expediting, and then you've got 2 runners on Fridays and Saturdays, 1 food runner and 1 drink runner. And when I train folks, I say, you are the bridge between the product and the people. And so, obviously in a timely manner, getting that quality product to the table, but then also engaging that person for the sake of their experience. And then this is something we added in the last maybe year and a half, is the mod role. So one of the 7 managers of Fount, including us, for mostly the morning into the early afternoon, they're kind of like a Swiss Army knife. So they might be a 3rd bar back if it's crazy, and you need to expedite. They might need to go check in on the kitchen. There might be an exciting opportunity with a guest. There might be a more difficult opportunity with a guest. But the mod is basically, I'm here to serve the team and serve guests. And mods can pretty much work any position, roughly. And so they're there to plug in for the sake of the team and for the sake of the guest experience. So yeah, on a Friday, Saturday morning, we have quite a lot of folks front of house on board.
Yeah, that's the irony in that, because we started off this conversation describing that as efficient. Optimal might have been a better word I initially used, but to map that just so it's tangible for the listeners, that example for that staffing are on a $7,000 day.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah.
And that justifies the expense of having all of these folks operating at a high level, where the small cafe, for example, and this is kind of what I was thinking, where we've been a little cynical towards shift leads in the past, where people can put shift leads into place almost as a way of generating opportunity where the finances don't actually justify it. But in this case, it sounds like you've got these positions because that's what the business needs, right? So your community is supporting your business in a very tangible way. So you need to support their business, that in good faith, you're talking about reflecting back to them their worth and their value. Even just honoring the fact that they want to spend money in your cafe means staffing it well enough to handle the business they bring to you. Yeah. So then in that case, a shift lead is something that you might well do as a means to deliver what people expect and beyond that. So the question becomes then, as you operate this way, how do you keep those positions managed and led well and resourced well, so that they're not simply put into those positions? And with a lot of coffee shops, what will happen is you are now there for this thing, and we'll check in with you when we see things going off the rails, but hopefully it won't. So what does that continued coaching and management look like for those roles across the cafe?
We do PDIs with every team member. So shift leads also have PDIs. So that's one area where we're checking in and coaching. But we also, before our quarterly all hands meetings, also have a shift lead meeting. So once a quarter, it gets meeting heavy, but that's an opportunity for us to also check in with our leaders and encourage them and challenge them and talk about any areas where they can be better supported to lead the team well. So the shift lead meetings are super valuable.
Yeah, and I think just on the floor, I mentioned it earlier, but the manager role, the idea is that they're people-focused guests and team members. And so throughout the day, there's going to be high points and low points. And it's kind of their job to have a pulse on that. So, a newer runner, for example, on a Friday morning might feel like they are getting destroyed, plates piling up in the window. And obviously that comes with the territory. You have to learn how to manage that. You have to learn where to go, when to go, why to go. But I think the manager can still help that. You don't have to let them sink, right? And so it's kind of our goal and then their goal to, be a life vest for them and use it as a teaching moment. Maybe it's not saying, hey, maybe it's saying you're doing a great job, X, Y, Z. Maybe in a moment it's not saying we need to do it this way. but maybe an after shift follow-up saying, hey, I noticed this. Can you tell me why you were doing that? Here's a suggestion. So like we said earlier, that manager role has become so important. Just, we're really grateful for a busy cafe, but it also has a lot of challenges. And so for our managers to be there and really be that like lifeboat has been a huge, huge win for us.
Yeah. I think the last thing I would want to add in terms of efficiency and scheduling is we have a very clear standard at Fount that we honestly try and warn people about in interviews. I think there is a really maybe glamorous or ideal picture in people's heads of being a barista, of like, you get to sort of hang out and talk to guests and make pretty latte art. And that is definitely an element of working at Fount, but there is very little downtime. In fact, the standard, if you ask our team, is always be moving. So there is always something to be done. And so especially from starting at the beginning versus our current schedule, and keep in mind, we went through COVID and different seasons like that. That was sort of the rough framework there, is like, okay, if everyone is moving 24/7 and they are like not able to take care of the volume, then it's time to add a person. But if there's margin left, if people had margin to sort of hang out or, X, Y, or Z, then the solution is not necessarily to add another team member. The solution is to like, okay, let's dig deeper and see how can we continue to be productive.
We have a pretty, I don't know, intense feels like a strong word, but our hiring process is, we're very thorough. So we have like a interview, but then we also have a trial shift where that interviewee will come in and actually plug in, and it's like an hour and a half, but we get to see them in action. It's not a full picture of their capabilities, but it gives us a sense of like, are they proactive? Are they going to be able to jump into this volume? And also for them to see what it's like to work at Fount, so they know if it's a good fit for their personality or what they're looking for in a job. So that, I think, helps with building a team that like can plug into the Fount schedule in that way. It's just being super diligent about who we hire and how like clear we are about the expectations.
You bring up something that I think is really important here. It's this perspective on people's expectations of the job and the kind of work they're going to be doing, where there is this perception of, coffee house is a chill job, and ownership can kind of fall into that trap too, where I really always love coffee shops. I'd like to open a coffee shop so I can have a cute coffee shop to, have my lattes in. And of course, it's kind of trite to bring it up now because I think a lot of us aren't, at this point understand, but new entries into the market don't necessarily get it quite yet. But there's no more difficult job than to be a barista at a slow coffee shop, in my opinion, because it's a psychological drain. There's a lot of stress as an owner to get people always be cleaning, but if there's no customers, what are we cleaning anymore? Nothing's getting dirty. So the idea here is that it's not so much that, you're going to burn out because there's a lot of work to do. It seems like what you've built is the ability for people to tap into a capacity that brings pride of work, that brings a certain satisfaction to you and to them, that is based on some exhausting work. If you're doing those numbers in that kind of day with food and coffee and people, it is going to drain you. But there is a kind of draining that is rewarding, if that makes sense. Like to spend oneself in a worthy cause feels pretty rewarding. And I get the sense that that's kind of what you're going for.
Yeah, I think I've just picked up running in the last couple of years. And, if I were to sit on the couch or like sit on the beach for a few weeks in a row, at some point I would get really tired of that. Like it would be relaxing for a day, but then I'd get tired of it. But if I was to go run every day for 2 weeks, it would be exhausting, but I would feel this sense of accomplishment. And so similarly at Fount, when we are like, we're created to work, right? And so I think when we are working and working hard and stacking hands on the mission. We're a part of something bigger than ourselves. It's super satisfying, even though you're exhausted at the end of the day. Maybe plantar fasciitis.
Yeah. And I would just add to that and say it is a little bit counterintuitive maybe for a lot of folks, especially who have come from the industry. The service industry as a whole, as we all know, is unfortunately very toxic. And that is one of the reasons why we wanted to be so intentional in being an industry disruptor with building a solid culture. But yeah, just that idea of reminding people of their worth and esteeming them highly. So we look at our team and we're like, you guys are hospitality professionals. To sell yourself as anything lower than that just simply isn't true. You guys are contributing in a super significant way with, and so really focusing on encouraging them, encouraging their craft. I think the way you see your team, the way you communicate to them is significant in this.
And I think there's like daily life change that we're fortunate enough to like be able to read the reviews and see, even if it's not a direct message, that if someone reaches out to one of us, right? Like the reviews are public, they're out there. Katie responds to every single one, which is amazing on her. And we try to put those in front of the team as well to remind them, because a lot of times they'll call out, those reviewers will call out specific experiences or interactions they had with a team member. And we all wear name badges. And so to try to help foster some of that relationship building, but it's cool. So then we get to just relay that to that team member, and then they know that even though every day they're doing the same amount of effort to love on these people and make them feel certain ways and esteemed, it's cool to be able to show them when those people voice that back to us.
And the beauty of a coffee shop is a lot of times you get to be a part of someone's daily routine because people drink coffee every day. So we do have a lot of repeat guests that have become part of the Fount family. Like we know them, we know what they're celebrating, we know what they're going through. So we remind our team that we get to be a part of their story. And then also when it's somebody's first time at Fount, it's an opportunity to engage them to become part of the regularity of Fount. So we have actually a process where we put FTG, first time guest, on the ticket, not because we would do anything wildly different for a first time guest, but just as like a heads up to the runner, to the kitchen, to the baristas, like this is an opportunity to really make a difference or an impact on this person because it's their first time here and they haven't experienced Fount before.
All throughout this conversation, I'm reminded of the idea that if you focus on something, you'll see it everywhere. And you can pick it out in a crowd. It's kind of like the voice of your mom at the mall, it's like, it very well. And, or, think about blue cars today and you'll see nothing but blue cars. And in your case, it sounds like the mission, vision, and values is a way of life that allows you to, and your team, to take advantage of that kind of noticing and that intentionality, and then take action on it in a way that creates the culture that you are setting out to create, which is what I would imagine is the antidote to something that's toxic, where we can redefine, and what you were saying, disrupt the way that these coffee shops and cafes are generally assumed to run. Nice on the outside, well branded, but when you work there, it's a little inconsistent. And I commend you for that, because it does take an enormous amount of discipline to keep that focus. But the reward is that noticing and the opportunities. Even I forget who said it. You said difficult opportunities, which I hadn't heard it put that way. But I was like, yeah, that's a very positive way to think about a challenge with a guest. It's a difficult opportunity. So this has been a fantastic exploration of what you've built in 7 years. Soon it'll be 10, and who knows how many years passed. But what are your plans right now for what you want to see evolved? Maybe what the natural next level for Fount Coffee is.
We're so grateful for just this time and place that we get to sit in, and we have a lot of aspirations. We're thankful for the growing volume and kind of bursting at the seams that currently exists. And so there is a lot of opportunity. However, we're trying to stay very patient and diligent, and knowing that expansion oftentimes leads to something being sacrificed. This level of standard and attention is now spread out across, say a couple locations, as an example. So we're trying to be really patient in it. There's always the new shiny thing going on in the triangle, and there's a lot of exciting things to entertain. And so we'll see. Yeah, we wrestle with it every day. We're trying to make sure that the next step for Fount is the right one for, again, the whole team that's a part of this.
That's great. So thank you all for this window into the life of your business. It was great. And where can we learn more about Fount Coffee online? Visit you if we're in the area. Give us all the details.
Instagram would probably be maybe the best way. We update that most often at Fount Coffee on Instagram. We're a little too old for TikTok, so Instagram would be the best. We also have like our website, fountcoffee.com. But if you're coming into the Triangle, we are just a few minutes from the airport, and so it could be a nice spot to check out right when you're landing. But yeah, at Fount Coffee on Instagram would be the best way.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
We
And thanks,
appreciate
Lem.
Yeah.
Shout out to Lem.
Shout out to Lem.
That's right. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, everybody. Well, that I thought was fantastic. A really big thank you to the husband and wife teams there at Fount Coffee and Kitchen. Thank you to Shawn and Kristen and Katie and George for your insight, for sharing freely and passionately about what drives you every day, what drives your leadership, and how it's brought such great results to the customer and the staff experience. These are the people who these places are built for. And it's obvious that you yourselves, I think everybody, if you're thinking about this conversation, take a listen and a look if you watched it. These are folks who are enjoying what they're doing, enjoying the fruits of their labor. For me, this is the kind of thing I would wish for every coffee shop. And let's take a page from their playbook. Go back and re-listen, take notes, and start applying these things in your cafe. I think there's lots of transferable wisdom that they've shared that will transform the way that things operate in your coffee shop. So the best place to go to stay in touch with what they're doing out there, first you could just go, if you're in Morrisville, and check out their cafe. Come hungry and thirsty for some great coffee. And then if you're not going there and you just want to check out what it's about, go to Fount Coffee on Instagram. It's just at Fount Coffee, and you can springboard from there to their websites and everything else. Get a feel of what their culture is about. So a big thank you again to Shawn, Kristen, George, and Katie for joining us on the show. And if you have any questions for me about today's episode, whether it's about the concepts or just, comments and etc., go ahead and email Chris at keystotheshop.com. That's also where you can reach me if you just want to talk about coaching, consulting, or signing up to apply for the key holder coaching groups, these mastermind cohorts we do twice a year with coffee shop owners like yourself. And that would be fun to have a conversation and see your application come through. So yeah, reach out, Chris at keystotheshop.com. And with that, I'm going to say thank you again for joining me. If you would, subscribe, share these episodes, hit me up on Instagram at Keys to the Shop. If you're not following me on Instagram, it's very easy. Everything is at Keys to the Shop. Also, LinkedIn people. There is a whole LinkedIn culture. For me, it feels like the boomer TikTok, but you can find me on there. It's Chris DeFirio on LinkedIn. So maybe send a connection request or something, or start a conversation. So anyway, thank you everybody so much. Thanks to the owners of Fount Coffee and Kitchen. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.